So let me give an example of one more bad playbook. And those who don't know me, a little bit of introduction about myself. My name is Adnan and I'm here in New Jersey. I've been in industry for more than 15 years and I have worked in the top Fortune 30 companies, Big Fours, large enterprise. I have designed and developed infrastructure for I don't know, more than 100,000 environment, architected those infrastructure, and this is something I do it every day, and I've been doing for the last so many years. I have been advising, providing consultation to many companies. So again, those who don't know me, it was my little introduction. So let's get into some of the SOC best practices, and then in the future you'll see some more idea. But these were some requested, so we're going to talk about one more playbook, which is I'm going to talk about a bad example of a playbook, which is if you have ever heard, if you have ever configured just one playbook for everything, or maybe one playbook for everything for every environment. What do I mean by that? So in any infrastructure, we have so many components, but I'll talk about a couple of them based on my notes I have. Especially when it comes to cloud, you have one of the component or criteria or some of the thing you wanted to monitor is identities, because cloud is all about identities, and you can have single cloud platform or you can have multi-cloud platform. Another thing in those environment, and especially if you're going from on-prem and hybrid, or from the sake of it's a cybersecurity, if you go as long as 20 years back, we have seen that antivirus, malware, and all those. So we used to install these agents on the machine. So this is now we call today is endpoint, and the tools what we call EDR, MDR, managed services, endpoint remediation, XDR, you name it. So those are the things, right? And the third thing is, what is the motivation of the hacker these days? If you look at the breaches from the last 10 years or so, so many data breaches have happened, right? I just said the word data. So every hacking motivation is related to data. It's a financial data, confidential data, health data, banking data, real estate data. They steal it and they sell it and they misuse it, because with this kind of data they know your personal identification, like your name, your address, your phone number, your financial record, and the list goes on. They can misuse it the way they want it to. Like in US, the T-Mobile has been hacked 5-6 times, so they have all my data. They know my phone number, they know my first name, last name, even they might know my social security. If not the full one, they know my last 4 digits. So that kind of data is being sold. There is always a motivation. So when it comes to writing and designing for your playbook, you don't want to have one copy paste version of playbook for dealing this kind of scenario, especially when it comes to 2026, when it comes to cloud. You can have just one playbook. That would be a worst example, because these are all different type of threats. In a different environment, it's fine. You can have a multi-cloud because identity remains the same. You can have some data stored in a storage bucket versus blob storage, you name it, but it's the data. So we're going to go by what kind of threats there. So identity related threat, data access related threat, endpoint related threat, right? So you want to deal with them differently. So in these scenarios, you got to have different playbooks for each kind of scenario or services mentioned, right? So identity has to be dealt differently versus the endpoint and the data. So these were the very bad example, and you don't want to automate all these in the same fashion. So some of the notes I have it here for you is, if you go to my couple of videos before, I was talking about impossible travel, and that for the impossible travel we talk about it was identity related. And then when you have to evaluate the identity, you have to have the checklist. The checklist I have already defined in that separate video. There are 4 or 5 different steps. You need to look into that. Now talk about the second thing, or if there is an incident related to a malware. So you got to have a a different playbook for that, which is related to your endpoint. What tools do you have? And that endpoint will be sending you the feed from that machine. And then based on the criteria and all that, you need to make sure when is the right time to isolate that machine. Not necessarily there's a malware impacting that machine. There could be some bad application causing the problem, right? There are some, I remember Microsoft Teams 2-3 years ago used to take a lot of memory and it used to cause some dump, right? So those are not threats. So again, you need to evaluate and what kind of feed and data you're getting from EDR. Your EDR could be Microsoft Defender, CrowdStrike, I don't know, Carbon Black is still used or not, right? This is what I'm saying. So that should be sending the feed, and you got to have a separate playbook for that. We did talk about data exfiltration or data security. So this is very, very important. And with extra care, it has to be dealt with when it comes to cloud. Because if your organization has already moved to cloud, even if in a hybrid, so in Microsoft Shop, everybody use OneDrive for business that can have sensitive data. People are sort of saving any kind of all sort of information, Word files, Excel sheets, so that can have some sensitive information. So that information can be exfiltrated, and I've seen many attempt security alerts like that in the last many years. A big dump of file. People used to export a lot of data, and we used to catch them on the Palo Alto firewall, all those, right? So you got to have those visibility as well. That's one thing if you look at from the Office 365 or SAD or Microsoft SaaS product or GC or Google Workplace. But when it comes to storage, blob storage, file storage, S3 bucket, what are you going to do, right? So depending on your organization, you may want to have a separate playbook for that, because SaaS product is different versus this will fall into PaaS or infrastructure where you manage the storage. That's not, you can set up different level of permission. So, and this storage can also be accessible by operating system. So you have to start thinking in that way when you are trying to write those playbook, and then you have to evaluate. So those are the scenario needs to, and those storage can also store sensitive information in the file, in the blob storage. So that kind of thing you have to think separately. Do not plan and assume same thing, because controls are developed, the deployment architecture is developed. So as an engineer, you should not be applying just one playbook for everything. And then there are some points which I mentioned already for impossible travel, malware attack, privileged access, and privileged access for the identity related. I've even talked about before. It should not be a break class account and all that stuff. So these are the best practices which I already talked. And then what you have to do as a best practice, make sure your audit and logging is always enabled, because that is the proof. If something were to go wrong, you should be able to have that. And as a best practices, you should be ingesting the log into SIEM. And SIEM is not your archive, and logging is different. So SIEM is different, logging and archive is different. But if you don't know, I can put another video or detail how does it work in large enterprise and how different it is, what's the point. So as a good best practice, as a SOC architect, it's your job responsibility to make sure you have a separate identity playbook. You should have a separate endpoint playbook where you should have the contact details and the endpoints and how you're gonna deal with that, which I just talked about it. You want to have separate IAM playbook, because IAM also growing pretty fast, which I've been talking about since 2016, and data protection playbook. So playbooks should follow based on the security domains. There are more security domains, but so far I think when it comes to operational work, this will be more than enough. So you don't want to be that kind of copy paste engineer. Make sure you bring value to this, and I given you those best practices. Do use them, do apply them, and eventually first time to set it up is gonna be a work, but that's your creative work, and that's your creative and critical thinking based your environment. Every environment is unique, but it's not difficult, it's not impossible. It will take some extra time, but then once you are set up and done with that, then you can automate and repeat and automate. So again, I hope this is helpful. If you like it, let me know in the comments, and do mention your country, because I'm planning on doing some contest in your country. So without knowing, it will be difficult. So let me know if you're from the US, Canada, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, wherever you are from. It will help me, and then I can work with you and planning some contest in the country in 2026. So with that being said, I'll see you in my next video. Thank you. Bye.